And we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Dumb SEO Questions, episode 285. Each week we meet here to answer the questions asked on the SEO Questions community on Google+, and also the Dumb SEO Questions Facebook group. With us tonight, we have David Rozam. Some say he's the oldest man in SEO. He's a leading internet marketer based
You say I'm the oldest man in SEO. No one else does.
All right. David is based in the southern, sunny side of the
That's
UK.
the bottom. Yes.
And you can find him at writingforseo.org and also davidrozam.com. All right, Jenny Halaz is she describes herself as an internet search geek. She's founder and president of JLH Marketing, a regular on the public SEO speaking circuit, and yeah, she's proud to call herself an SEO. She's based on the east coast of the USA, not too far from Raleigh, in North Carolina.
In Raleigh. Yep.
Oh, you're in Raleigh, North Carolina. Masataki Wasa, he's in Wimbledon in the UK. He is webmaster of wasaweb.net and also a top contributor, although you guys have got a new name now, don't you? Not top contributor?
Yeah, product experts, I think.
What is it?
Product experts. Product experts.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Product expert. I mean,
he does something related to helping people on Google.
Yeah.
I still like top contributor, you know.
Would Tim Kappa product expert, would that be a compound oxymoron?
No, you should say Tim Kappa, who is a Google My Business product expert. You need... Oh, now you kicked off. Oh, now she's going off. You see what you've done.
Anyway, Masataki can be found at wasaweb.net, WASAWEB.net. He's a Google product expert on the AdSense community. Tim Kappa is CEO of onlineownership.com in the UK. He's also it's very hard for me to say this, product expert on the Google My Business community. Oh dear. And you can find Tim at onlineownership.com. He's based in Corby, 100 miles north of London. And William Rock, he is based in Kansas, in about the middle of the USA. He is a Google top contributor on the web search community. Are you a product expert, William, or
I'm a top contributor.
a top contributor?
Yeah, for the Google search.
Product
Google
experts. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I feel inferior. I'm the only one on the panel who's not some kind of fancy Google title.
All right, let's get cracking on our question. We've got 12 questions tonight. Let me tweak this one. I did send that. Okay. All right, let's move on to the first question. It's from Neil Cheeseman. It's titled, a mentioned or quoted brand name without a hyperlink. Does it have any SEO value? Of course it does. It has brand value. is there any evidence that a website or brand name being mentioned or quoted without a hyperlink, does it have any SEO value - brand awareness?
Yes. Any mention of your company is going to be beneficial to you. I mean, does it have a direct link benefit? No, but it's still going to be helpful. It's going to help establish you as an expert. And I think as Google moves more into, well, Bill Slawski did a great post recently about a patent that Google was just approved for called Trust Rank. So that's definitely worth looking into. I don't think it's really in effect yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is at some point put into the machine learning algorithms to look for sites that have high trust, lots of mentions, and brand awareness.
Yeah, for sure. And it, like, you know, on the flip side, there may be some, you know, a discussion, or whether it's a new service or a new product or some new thing that's mentioned in a well-read publication or blah, 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 you know, people read that and they see your brand and, you know, sales go up, or at least visits to your site or direct searches. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a link in order for it to benefit you, to make sales. Yeah, for sure. Just to mention, that's enough. Obviously in the right place, but yeah, that's enough.
I think we'll call that an answer, and we'll move on to the next. I hope you like that answer, Neil Cheeseman. This one from Zeno Citas, on 2 web pages that show the same product but in 2 different languages. Zeno said, "Hi everyone, I have a quick dumb SEO question. I have 2 web pages that show the same product but in 2 different languages. There is no translation of the product name itself, so the pages are currently sharing the same H1 product titles. My understanding is it's never a good idea to have 2 pages competing for the same keywords. So what would be the best solution from an SEO standpoint? Should I be using canonical to only focus on one of them?"
Well, okay, so just back to that, it's the same product in 2 different languages. Well, you should have your title and your H1 in that actual language that is in. So if one's in English, it will say the best pink fluffy elephants, and if it's in you know, if it's in Afrikaans, the best of pink. I don't even know what fluffy is in Afrikaans anymore. I've been away too long. Olifanta. So the point being is your title of that page should be, and your description should be in that language. Your H1 should also be in that language of that page, and you should correctly annotate each page with hreflang to say to search engines, I would like you to serve this page for, you know, to this language search. So yeah, I think you're kind of looking at this, if I'm reading the question correct, I think you're looking at it the wrong way. I think you should be looking at it, I've got 2 language pages. How do I get Google to actually understand that these are 2 different languages and to serve them to the correct language of the searcher who's searching? So yeah, I think you should revisit those language pages and actually correct the language on that page that should be there. You know, things like your book now, if you buy now or check out, all those kind of things should also be in that language on that language page. You know, things like that. I think you should revisit those pages and focus on getting that product for the correct language properly squared away.
I think that's, I totally agree, hreflang, but I think maybe what the questioner was asking was if there's a product that has to be the same in all languages. David had made a comment. That's a perfect example that you made, that you put in the comments, David. A BMW 567i. So that would be the same in US, in Germany, in France. So the title could potentially be the same, but if everything else on the page is translated, then hreflang is the way to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Tim. Anybody else?
And David.
Yeah, I think one thing we can say, one thing we can say reasonably sure is that canonical is not going to be the answer in this case.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So it's either going to be hreflang, or doing something else, but not canonicalizing to one language version of the page. That's not going to work.
That would create a poor search experience in whatever country specific search engine you were accessing it in.
Yeah. Plus, if he's got if he's doing the translation plugins, for example, I put this in the comments, but wpml.org is an opportunity for, instead of actually creating a separate page, you can actually have on that independent page itself that you're writing for, have that translation, like David had mentioned with the BMW example. You can actually put in the translation of what that should mean or how it's supposed to be written out for that language. Because a lot of those translation plugins don't necessarily translate properly, and it kind of looks wonky when you're actually reading that in that language. So especially different slang terms. So slang terms, or you got, yeah. So there's tons of different examples, but that wpml.org, check it out if you've got a WordPress.
Excellent. All right, let's call that a wrap, and we'll move on to the next if there's nothing further to add. Okay. This one is from Christopher Shin. It's titled, "How many SEO pros block crawlers from crawling CSS and JavaScript, or cascading style sheets and JavaScript from the robots file?" And he wants reasons.
I think at last count, only about 5. You shouldn't do this. Google wants to crawl CSS and JavaScript these days, is it not?
Yeah, well, especially with the mobile first algo. I mean, they want to see as much information as possible, and that you're showing anything that you're showing visually, and not trying to hide something, like spoofing a page or cloaking pages, all that crazy stuff you can do in JavaScript and CSS. There's a lot of techniques that used in the past for spamming techniques. That, still go on today. Marketers still think they can get away with it, but
yeah, I suppose I would put a question the other way around. Why would you want to block CSS and JavaScript files? I think what do you want to achieve with that? And I can't really see the reason for doing so.
Tim, you see who's said this to him? He's Dev, and we all know what you think of developers.
Huh? Who's dead? What are you talking about?
He's web developer. He's web developer has said block them.
All right, let's call that an answer for Christopher, I should say. Yeah, you really got to tell that guy that there's no point in. I mean, and then these aren't big files either. There's really no excuse for blocking them. or no necessity. Okay.
Well, I think one thing to add to that, Jim, is when we're looking at JavaScript and CSS and looking at speed, load time, and all that stuff, a lot of these reports will show that the JavaScript or the CSS needs to be modified, and sometimes it can't be compressed more. So that might be an indication of what he's trying to ask. I could be wrong, but
thank you, William. All right, this one from Johnny Olson. I think we've got a similar one in this week's questions. He said, our developers, by mistake, indexed our dev site a while back. What is the best way to rectify this? 310, 308? I've got no idea what that is. Anyway, 410. 310 and 308, I have no idea. What would you guys do, as I've never had this happen to me? So I'm not sure the best way to approach it.
Welcome to the club. Easy with the 410, 410 everything, and then go back into your console and use the removal tool within Search Console. Probably the fastest way. You're just basically getting rid of every single URL that's got dev in front of it, making sure that that dev site's still not indexable. So it's always important to actually have a no follow, no index when you're actually putting it out, so that visually, the executives and other pieces of the team can see the site. But if it did have an index follow, then those are going to be found in the search engines. But 410 is telling that it's completely gone.
Yeah, and maybe he meant 301 with that question, but I agree with William. I wouldn't do a 301 because they'll keep those in the index and just keep coming back to them to make sure that they're still going where you think they're going. The 410 is the way to go.
Yeah, and a 301, you may end up with 301 looping. So you may actually have a bigger problem if you start to create a loop chain.
Definitely.
Yeah, I had a genius developer attempt that a couple of weeks ago, and it just completely ignored it was just a complete loop, and Google ignored the end of the loop and just indexed the middle of the loop. And yeah, you don't want to go down that road.
And one cautionary point is, if you have already put a no index, a disallow on robots.txt, take it off, because Google can't get to those pages to see that they're now 410 if the robots.txt is on there. That's what you should have done in the first place, but now that that bell has been rung, you can't unring it. So leave it off there until they drop all those pages, then you can put it back on.
Yeah, and one other thing is, did you make sure if you're live with the new site, making sure you do a link crawl, make sure that there's no actual dev.domain.com in your link structure anywhere on the page. Otherwise, that's going to constantly come back and haunt you.
Yes, good point, William. Well, while you guys were giving those excellent answers, I looked up the HTTP response codes. And 308 is a permanent redirect, not unlike a 302, but don't allow the method to change. So, for example, submitting a form to a permanently redirected resource may continue smoothly. All right, but 310, no idea. It's not listed amongst the response codes. All right, let me tweet that. I probably already have. No, I haven't. Okay. This one from Ashley Brennanstuhl. Ashley has a question titled, does my URL need to match my product title? She said, I'm renaming some of the products on my site and I have a dumb question. I sell multiple different types of break-apart chocolate bar molds. One of them I want to name 2-ounce break-apart chocolate bar mold. It sounds like a disease, doesn't it? Would it be better to call it 2-ounce, like 2OZ, or 2 ounce spelt out? Also, which would be better, putting the 2 ounce up front or naming it Break Apart Bar Chocolate Mold 2 ounce? Final question, does my URL need to match my product title?
I think it's a good question. I think the URLs still have some kind of value when somebody's looking at them, but I don't think it's going to change your SEO factor at any. When you're actually naming your H1s and your content and maybe your title itself, that's being displayed when somebody's searching for you in Google, yeah, your title, your description is going to separate you from the pack, just like you would be writing a Google ad. The title and the description are going to be your call to actions, but in a URL, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference between going one way or the other. But I could be wrong.
Okay. The problem is okay. So I'm probably overthinking this, but one thing I just want you to be aware of, and if you're saying just you sell multiple different types of break apart chocolate molds, right? And one of them that you're discussing here is the 2 ounce break apart chocolate molds. Now, I'm assuming you may have a 4 ounce, a 6 ounce, and they're all going to be the same. So what I think would be better would be in your, and I don't know what, CMS you're using. I don't know, what I think would be better is for you to have a break apart chocolate mold page. And then the user can select the size of the ounce that they want to check out or purchase. That way you've got one break apart chocolate mold, bar mold page. You can put all, your product. You have to try and create different product info for the same product on multiple different things. And ultimately it's going to be so similar that when somebody searches break apart chocolate mold, Google's not going to list your 2 ounce, 4 ounce, 6 ounce, 10 ounce in the search results. It'll just pick one. And if that particular user thinks, oh, I only want the 3 ounce, then they're literally not even going to click on your page. And if they do click on there, somewhere you need to be able to say, hey, go and look at our 4 ounce page or our 6 ounce page, because people, yeah. So it's going to get very confusing. That's if I'm assuming you do sell 2, 4, 6s, or 3s or 10s. So if you do, I recommend you have one page for your break apart bar chocolate mold. You could have them in different styles. So I don't know, maybe you have a unicorn shaped one and a elephant one. And those could be different styles. So that would be a break apart chocolate mold elephant. And then those, again, the user could select 2, 4, 6s. But I don't think you should have, if it's the same kind of thing, with unicorns, you shouldn't have, 2 ounces, and it's just going to be an absolute mess. So each kind of mold should have its own page. So if this one's for a unicorn, it should have a unicorn. The user can then select what size they want to, and then check out with that. And if it's an elephant break apart mold, it's an elephant break apart mold. The user can then select the 2, 4, 6 and check out with that. So I think that's a better way to go. That's assuming, I'm guessing that there are all these different sizes.
Good answer, Tim. I don't think anyone can top that. Okay, let's tweet that. We'll move on. Halfway through already. Danny Ladd asked the question, is it safe to get links from the author bio section in a guest post?
Well, kind of yes, but it all goes back to where are you chucking this? Most newspapers, even top quality, they normally have, depending if you're going to be a regular contributor, you would normally have an author page, which would then take you through to the author's page, and there it would list a link coming out of who you are and whatever you do and whatever. Normally they kind of no followed. I know a lot of the mainstreams are no followed, but other bigger ones, they are followed. It's not a problem. The question is, what kind of link are you doing? And the second one is where the quality of it. Don't go and chuck these things all over the place just for the sake of it. It's going to do you more damage. And I'm not thinking about the link. I'm just thinking about, the time and effort in creating an article. And then let's say, for example, chucking it on eZine articles, if they even still exist, right? You've got an author thing there, but it's worth jack, and it may even hurt you. So I think just go back to the real crux of it is, will you spending your time and effort actually benefit you by placing it there? Will you actually get traffic? Because, you could get a link somewhere that, even sometimes, from a newspaper or whatever, that doesn't even provide a direct link, but you could sell a shed load of product just from that, right? And you could go and spend 4, 5, 6 hours creating an article to then publish on a site, which is never going to get read. So what's the point? So I really, I wish people would really stop thinking about links in terms of links and thinking about what the actual end game of you spending time and effort to having something published somewhere. What is the end game? What is my ROI on that? And if you can, if you can separate all that crap about links, I need links, but just understand what the benefit is. And if you're not even going to get one visit coming out of that site, it was a complete waste of time, and including the link.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else? All right. All things in moderation, Danny lad. Okay, so our next one from Christian Malbor. He said, does the duplicate content thing matter on a local perspective? He goes on to ask, hi there. He said, I have a question regarding duplicate content and sites for local stores. Duplicate content is a bad thing. Not necessarily. But how does it behave regarding local stores? My current example is I'm seeing this. There's a parent company that is present throughout the country, but every single store has its own website, parent company-region name.cctld, all in the same country-specific top-level domain. The content on each of these websites is delivered from the parent company, so each region's website has the same content. And there are dozens of websites because there are dozens of stores, similar to McDonald's. From my point of view, it's all duplicate content, even though the different regions are inside a country. Is that right? He said it's hard for this brand to rank with a single page for a specific high volume / high competition, as each store has a duplicate page online that tries to rank for the same keyword. Is that right? Does the duplicate content thing matter on a local perspective? If I search a keyword relevant to the business, I always get a local result that fits with the duplicate content that every store has. Thanks in advance for your responses.
The sites are probably using cross-domain canonical, because if Google is getting the right result for the location that the search is in, then it's able to index all of them. So none of them are no indexed. And if they were all duplicate, I doubt it would get the right content, because it would be putting it all together. But if it's canonical, then Google is able to serve any one of the pages that are within that canonical. So that would be my guess, but I'd have to look at the code to know.
Yeah, I would say that basically that it depends on the situation. I mean, there's plenty of companies that they're the manufacturer of a product or service, and have dealers around that area or all over the world per se, and they're all going to use that same content. The thing that, like Jenny mentioned, it's going to be localized. Google can figure it out without all those tags. It's smart enough to actually start to figure that out anyways, without utilizing all the markup, but it makes poor decisions at one time as well. But I don't think the duplicate content is going to hurt you. Now it's take that a step further and look at what else you can do to add value to your location. You know, what other content are you providing? Are you just having exactly what that vendor is giving you, or do you have any helpful?
You need. So you need to understand. Like, so for example, I mean, you didn't say who these guys are, but you did mention McDonald's. Now, so for example, McDonald's, it's all going to be duplicate content. Hi, blah, blah, blah. The menu is going to be exactly the same. I know some of them change ever so slightly depending on regions. Some will sell a beer and some won't. Some will sell, but literally all the same. The nutritional info pages will be all the same, and everything will be all the same. But Google understands that. They understand that this guy is in that location, and that the same menu is going to be served there. It's going to be served there. But what they want to know and what they want to be able to do is, if someone is searching for his local McDonald's, just types in McDonald's, they're going to go, right, this is the one you need. Okay. They could ultimately just serve them the main one, and then, I don't know, somehow integrate a map into it or something. But they know that this is the one you want. And in that sense, yes, you're saying it's all duplicate content, but it makes sense to Google and it makes sense to the user, because they can clearly understand that I've got to display a menu, I've got to display the nutrition information, and I display my crap and exactly where it is, when it's open, and blah, blah, blah. That's about the only thing that's different, is the opening hours or closing hours and telephone number. I don't even know if McDonald's gives you a telephone number, or a telephone number of the store and the address of the shop or the store. It's literally, that's the only thing that's different. And maybe the particular country's head office, that contact numbers, that might be slightly, but other than that, it's all the same. But it makes sense, because that's what makes sense to the user. So it's not necessarily duplicate content. You need to be thinking does it make sense to my user? Is my product exactly the same? And am I serving in that area? Then you can kind of, look, it makes sense, and I'm going to get away with it. But if I am a branch, it's very difficult to kind of advise, especially with what you do. But that kind of makes sense as such. And it's in that regard, it's not really seen as duplicate, because it's serving the necessary information to the user who is wanting it.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. Search intent. What is the intent? What's the knowledge panel going to bring up for that need? What is it going to bring up that McDonald's is 2 minutes away from me, or is it going to bring up the main chain? And that works in any industry. So, but if it's, I'm selling this widget and a bunch of people sell my widget, then where can I find that widget the closest? So.
If I were advising this client, I would say there's a couple things you should look at. First off, it's got to be a tremendous amount of hassle to maintain that many different domains. So consolidating them may make sense. But there also may be some really strong external link signals on a local level to each of those domains. And that's something you would want to preserve. So not knowing anything about how this is all set up, I would probably go into it thinking that maybe the right move would be to consolidate on one domain and then redirect each individual domain to a corresponding location page on the main domain. But that would really be purely from a management perspective. I don't think it's going to have any difference in SEO one way or the other.
Great point. I mean, you take a chiropractor, for example, that's going to be opening offices in multiple locations. If they're talking about a simple adjustment or a simple technique or whatever it might be, they can't put that on 4 or 5 different sites, because how do you rewrite that so many times? It just doesn't make sense. It's too much management to do so. Like your idea, Jenny, is one location or one domain, and then having a locations tab for that makes a lot of sense, so that it can still stay with the same benefit. It doesn't have multiple domains and Google doesn't get confused.
Okay. All right. Let's call that a wrap for Christian, and we'll move on to the next. Did I tweet that? I can't remember. Okay. So this one from Marco Hernandez Daly on forwarding domains to the main one for branding purposes. Marco said, let's say I have a main domain, xyz.com, which has some high-paying keywords in it, but I want to acquire a couple of other domains which are not .com, but have very interesting keywords associated that have thousands of searches per month. I want to forward those domains to the main one for branding purposes. However, to do the SEO, does Google consider the other domains as backlinks, and do I need to perform SEO on each, or does the response.redirect help the crawler know it's the same? Does that still work? I know that it did work about 2011 or 2012 was the last time it was explained to me, but maybe it's still happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard conflicting observations about this recently. I tend to tell clients that that's old school thinking, that those exact match domains don't work anymore. But I've definitely had people tell me that they do work, particularly in a local setting. So I don't know. Any of you Google My Business guys got a better read on that?
I have one guy that's actually got an exact match domain still, and it was still way old. I think probably 6 or 7 years ago that he built this, but it's all about quality of the content. It doesn't really actually mean that just because they have an exact match domain is they're going to actually get outranked the next person, because his competitors without an exact match domain still actually kick his butt in certain keywords. So I think it's an even ground where that used to work. It's not working as effectively now. And it looks like, okay, let's go back to like the Panda days. You know, Panda is going to look at those quality signals and say, is this page quality? Should I rank it or should I not? And that's going to determine if you're actually going to go there. If your money keywords are basically what's bringing you the ROI, then let's look at how can you improve that section of your site. You know, what are your visitors looking for more of, and not focus on just, do I have an exact match domain and I'm going to win. It's what else are you providing the user?
Yeah, for sure. And also, you know, US and Europe, I don't know what country you're in, Marco, but US and Europe, yeah, EMDs now are pretty much on the same par. You know, from a brand new domain starting out today, it all depends on who's delivering the better user experience, the better content. There's no bump up. If you are in South America, Africa, still rocks. EMDs all day long if you get the opportunity. The algos there aren't up to scratch with the US, and so if I was starting a new business, South America, and anywhere in Africa, I'd hit it with an EMD straight off the bat, and you've got a 3 or 4 point position lead on the next guy, for sure.
Okay. All right, Marco, I hope you are satisfied with our responses. Let's move on to the next. Question from Razvan Alexa. A question about indexing of a large e-commerce site. It's for car parts. He's running a 200,000 page plus e-commerce site. Recently, we removed the canonicals, preventing indexing based on car model. The pages we submitted manually rank very quickly. However, indexing is close to 0 for the others. The site is in Magento 1. The sitemap contains 200,000 pages split into 6 sitemaps, none having more than 50% of the pages indexed. I'd be happy to clarify any aspect. Thanks a lot for your help.
I think what he needs to do is go back into Search Console and start to identify which ones are being indexed and then which ones are not, and then maybe identify or look at the value of that page. If that page for the car parts, it's difficult because there's probably not going to be a lot of information on that, and it might be finding that it's indexed, but it's just not getting found in the search.
Yeah, the thing is another question I would ask: where is so you remove the canonical model, right? So the point is, where in your structure is the car model? So I mean, where in the structure is it? What's preventing Googlebot from finding that? I mean, forget the sitemap for a second, because even with even if you didn't have a sitemap, Googlebot still needs to go through, find these and process it, right? Where in the site are these car models? How have you structured that car model page? Do you and how far down in the silo is it? Is it 50 deep? Is it within the actual car part itself that someone can select a car model? Is it on a because if they're not, naturally they should still be found and indexed. And you said less than 50%, I think you said. Yeah, sorry, I was like, huh? Yeah, so
it comes back down to the navigation, Tim. I mean, how far down is it? When you start to look at even the Google Assistant and being able to bring back that information to you quickly. If I'm actually out there working on my car and I look for, I already know I've got a Ford Escort or whatever it might be, year, model, make, and I'm going to actually pitch that into the search query itself, and Google has to actually bring back that information for me to know how to serve that result. Most of the time, they're going to come back with a car part. They may have a video talking about the car part, image search as well. Then you've got shopping search. So all those variations are going to be in there. And if it's not properly organized, I think Google's just going to pass it by because it's got so many other people that are putting it properly in. So I think, going back to Tim, you're right. focus on the actual site map, yet focus on your structure, your navigation, and how that can. I'd be curious to take a look at the canonical and why they ended up removing that from the model. I think that's a good variation. It goes back to the model itself. If I'm looking for a bearing, it's not going to be just out there randomly. It has to associate to that make and model.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in my mind, look, I mean, I kind of would take a car in and say, just fix the bastard. But in my mind, if I was searching for something, I would always start with the make first, or the model of it, whether it's a. So to me, that kind of should be your top line nav, and then break down, or then break it down into different sections of the vehicle. So, headlight or roof or side door or, or whatever. But to my mind, the model would always be your top line, the first go-to. But I mean, I've never done any research into that, so I'm not entirely sure. But
sorry to interrupt, Tim, but there is a clue in the comments for this one. It can be read on the Dumb SEO Questions Facebook group. But he said the setup was like this for the sake of an example. We have a headlight that fits both Ford F-150 and Ford 350. They created a generic product, and the 2 pages for the F-150 and the F-350 were canonicals to the main generic one. So only that got indexed. Since that page had no keywords, being listed only as headlight 45445, I removed the canonicals so that the page's headlight for 450 and headlight for F350 are to be indexed. We did this about 30 days ago and updated the submitted sitemaps accordingly. And this is where the problem is. The pages that no longer have the canonicals don't get indexed. He said, I manually submitted one of them and it ranked in the top 10 for F-150 headlight in a matter of days. So there is no penalty for the site.
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense. You've got multiple pieces that fit on different models, but I think it still goes back to that make and model, right, Tim? I mean, you're still kind of going that same page, but then you have a variant of the F350 versus the F150. There's still a variant that somehow, if you're basically going on the landing page, yeah, that's a tricky one, especially with that many products.
I think he's doing all right if he said 50% of them. I've seen like 80-page little business sites only have 20% indexed, via the sitemap a month later. I think 50% of 200,000 in 30 days, not bad going. And unfortunately, I'm not a Magento geek, so
there might be a couple plugins that he can install for that. But yeah, I'm not a Magento geek as well. But I'm also thinking that if he's gotten this one once he manually submitted it, maybe run through your analytics, maybe run through your CRM and see what is your top converting parts, and then start there versus going after the whole bunch. Just like anybody would do, you're looking at your ROI, your money makers, and your website. What's bringing you money, and is it worth that? If I'm spending it on AdWords or Bing, I'm still going to want to make sure I got a conversion out of that. Take that same drop in and look at, okay, this F-150 and 350 are important. So maybe try that experiment like you did in 30 days. It's now indexed. It's great. Well, maybe do that same thing with your other money-making parts versus the whole 200,000.
Yeah, I also, I mean, all of your answers, I totally agree with, guys. But I was just thinking that one thing he should do for taking a long-term view is getting hold of whoever does the loading of content for this site. Instead of having a thin content page that is just saying headlight 45445, he could simply be saying it fits F150 and F350. I mean, instead of trying to force Google to accept thin content, why not pad the content out? I mean, it's not realistic to expect someone to rewrite a 200,000 page site, but at least for new content added, it's that they should be putting in enough content for each product for people to be able to find it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You see that with printer sites. You know, if you're buying printer cartridges, they will you first search what the make is. So I'd search, and then you search the model, and a lot of them will have the printer cartridge, and then it will have the list on which it fits, and have a massive list, and makes sense, you know. And plus, you're not going to have massively just thin pages, like Jim said. That makes perfect sense.
Well, and you can also go a step further, like Jim was saying, add a little content to it, but then if there's other value props that you can do, such as if this person is actually installing it, it's not an actual mechanic, then you can have helpful tips and tricks on, you know, how that part is going to be installed, the proper ways of doing it, the tools you're going to need to install it with, and maybe there's a couple of tools that thing needs that you already have in your other parts category that you can actually have as a reference to say, okay, if you're going to install this, you're also going to need this. Gives you a chance to upsell as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Gee, I've got this tweeting thing on tap now. Okay. Neil Cheeseman has a question. It's titled "Deleting Web Pages That Haven't Had Any Traffic for a Year." What criteria are people using to decide that a page hasn't had any traffic for a year? The scenario is that you have X number of web pages that haven't had traffic for a year, don't have any backlinks to them, and don't link to any other internal pages. Maybe just old news items that nobody searches for anymore, i.e. time sensitive on a very local level. If deleting them, this will result in a 404. Is this okay? Yes. Or is it best practice to also submit them for removal in the Google Search Console?
I think it's good always to tidy up your site. I mean, if there's old news that basically is not relevant, or there's like promotions that you may have had on your site and it doesn't actually do any value, then 410 it. Make sure that the bot, doesn't matter if it's Google or Bing or whatever bot that's going to come across it, it knows that that page is permanently removed. But then, if a page, to take the flip side, if that page hasn't been trafficked for a while, I would look at why. And if it was something that was performing in the past and it's just basically a piece of content that actually still adds value, can you modify it and add value to that page to possibly rank again and get the traffic? So versus just deleting it.
I think as SEOs, we get really scared of anything that 404s or 410s, and let it, 404 away. In my case, I would say 404 because 410 requires a specific command that has to be maintained in perpetuity. So you might as well just 404 it, let the server take care of it naturally, and it'll eventually fall out of Google. I don't think you need to submit them for removal. I think Google will just eventually lose them. And I mean, they may report a few times, say this page is 404 in Search Console, but I think people tend to panic when they see 404 in Search Console, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, totally. It's like I was looking at someone's site the other day. It's been around 10 years, and there was there was like literally 10 news updates for Happy New Year, and all it said is name a company, ... wishing all of our clients a Happy New Year. Exactly the same, running on 6 years. Don't need them. You know what I mean? Delete, 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 delete. Bye, gone. 404. Cheers. Have a nice day. Move on. Yeah, you know, don't be worried about it. If it's no longer providing any useful information, just delete it, man. Move on to the next.
Yeah. And I mean, something like that, even if you have links pointing to it, even if they're links that, you know, are specific and say, hey, XYZ company wishes you a Happy New Year, that link has no value after, you know, a few days after the new year. So even if you have the link, there's no point in preserving it because it has no value. So just let it go.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, let's go to the next. Andreas Osorio asks, what are the best practices for H1 tag on a homepage? Andreas said, happy Friday, everyone. That must have been last week. He said, what are the best practices for H1 tag on a homepage? Would it be a keyword, company name, or wrapping the logo image?
See, neither of those, but you know, H1 is there for basically the reference of what that page is going to be around. You know, normally you'll see that in your title tag, your description. Keeping it consistent to what that page is going to be about is important, but not well, keyword, definitely.
Yeah, you know, your homepage 9 times out of 10 is going to be welcoming that user to that brand or that business. You know, 9 times out of 10. I wouldn't get too hung up about this. So if it's a dentist, you're going to be like, welcome to, you know, whatever the dental name is. So it's probably going to be the company name or the brand. You know, you're welcoming this customer who's never been there before. And that's normally, depending on your CMS, it's typically going to be your H1. Hi, welcome to, you know, the best, you know, pink fluffy elephant dentistry. And that's typical. That's the normal thing. Yeah, and wrapping the logo, mate. Geez, are they still doing that? That went out in the 80s. Yeah, your keyword is generally going to make sense from a reader's point of view to be an H2 lower down the page. After you've had your welcome and your little introductory about who you do and what you do, you're then probably going to start listing out the services or the products that you offer. And that's generally going to be in an H2 if you want to really get the structure right. But here's another little mind blower. You know, some of the best performing multi-million-dollar websites out there, which still look like they were created in the 80s, some of them are literally every single one is full of H1s. So I wouldn't get too hung up on this. It's not going to make you or break you, you know. You can still make, you know, your business can still turn over billions if every single tag in your site isn't an H1.
Not that we're recommending that you do that.
No, that we're not. Definitely not. But you know, it's on the flip side.
In spite of that.
Yeah. People come along and go, oh my God, whole site H1. I'm like, there's better things to do than trying to sort that out on a, you know, on a site that's been running for 20 years that makes 50 million a year, you know, probably better things to spend your time on. Yeah.
The times I've seen logos in H1 tags, I don't know where that one came from, but
stupid.
I've seen that so many times.
The 80s.
So I just did a session on SEO and usability at South Florida PubCon. And one of the things that I pointed out that I think a lot of people still don't realize is that the reason that the H1 is important and the reason that Google even cares about it at all is because it's a very important element in a screen reader. So if someone who is visually impaired or otherwise uses a screen reader is trying to access your website, they need that H1 to tell them what the website is. Otherwise, they have no clue what is on your page. They can't see your images. They have to know what it is that this page is about. So as long as your H1 explains what the page is about, then it's going to naturally end up using keywords, whether that keyword is the company name as on the homepage or a keyword name as a keyword like a product name. So if you think about it from that perspective, you'll never fail, basically. And the idea of wrapping the logo in an H1 is so absurd. I see it all the time, but it's not even W3C compliant. I mean, that's not what the H1 is for. The H1 is for text.
The hard part is that still being said in SEO documents around the world. It just needs more clarification because some people that are coming into the industry, they don't know what's right and what's wrong. So I think like the show, we don't have any dumb SEO questions. Ask it, but at the same time, is you're going to find a lot of that type of content still out there in circulation. But I like the screen readers.
One that gets my goat right now is certain people and tools telling SEOs that they can't have, or webmasters that they can't have the H1 and the title be the same. Of course you can.
Yeah.
Of course you can. That's dumb. They have two different purposes.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. I think that this is our last question. Darshan Rowell asks, how do you guys select a low competition keyword with high traffic volume?
Okay, so look, there's tools out there, that, for example, SEMrush, that will analyze things and provide an estimated, competition behind it. You don't necessarily need to do that. Yeah, I mean, you can't just chuck in a thing and go, right, this is going to be the keyword, or whether it be long tail or whatever. But the easiest way I think you can do it for yourself, if you don't have any of these tools, is using your Google Search Console. And you can identify, low-hanging fruit in your Search Console also. So you can, pop it in. You have, your impressions and position. Obviously, those aren't exactly accurate, but you can have the impressions and where you appear, and all of a sudden you'll start seeing if you appear somewhere. You may be like position 150 something like that, and it may be for a keyword related to the site, has some fairly decent, and if you check it out, it has some fairly decent searches. But you're already appearing, and you don't necessarily have content, or you may just have one particular page that's only mentioned this once, but your whole site is kind of, semantically similar to this, but you just haven't explored that part of the particular service or product or industry. And you're already appearing for it, and you don't have content on it. So that's what, like, you can already say, oh, great, that's an opportunity for me. It's, not many people I'm already appearing somewhere for it. But can I now look at creating content, whether it be an actual top line page, an article, a video, or, content around that, to actually then start targeting that. So that would be if you're looking at free, then that's completely free, and you can start then looking at that. Or you can identify things, particularly, if it's low competition. I mean, you're pretty easy to spot. but if you identify something, create a bit of content around it, and depending on what it is, whether it be top line, a service, or a product, or a blog article, news, whatever, and see how that reacts, and then you can actually start planning out a content strategy around that particular subject matter, to then start walking it up, the positions. And of course, your longer tail is also, obviously they're not high traffic volume, but some of them may surprise you. But just also be careful of when you say high traffic volume. 90% of these are always offering suggested. So it's like you might see something in AdWords, if you're using an AdWords tool, may say 20,000. Just remember that's not accurate, totally accurate. And also, even if you hit position 1 for that, you're only looking at about 30 to 40% of the actual estimated traffic on that. So, don't, about traffic and things. Start thinking about your user, what they're actually searching to get to you. If this is a business, if you are a business, one of the quickest ways I recommend to clients when I first take on a client is spreadsheet opened up, ready with whoever the call handlers are. And every call that comes in that has a question about a product or service or thing, that gets noted down in the spreadsheet. Then at the end of the week, that's compiled. Right, okay, that's been used before. That's been used. This one, brand new question about some product thing. Never heard that before. And that can be targeted. That can either be included into the product itself that you service. You can actually say like this phrase, I don't know, this table seats 6, comfortably, or this table will only seat 4, or the little things which when you're looking at a product you don't necessarily always think about, and customers will always be asking these questions, and that is content. So whether it just be, I'm going to find how I'm going to answer that content where. So it could be in the product itself. It could be, you could look at it and go, actually, hang on, this involves a massive article, or can I break it down into 3 or 4 steps within that kind of service or product or whatever. It could just be a video to answer. So yeah, there's a whole lot of different things, but there isn't an exact way of just finding a keyword and going, oh, that's, some of the tools, they do a fairly good job of figuring it out. But if you're not going to do it, I would say your first job is Search Console.
I agree with everything that Tim just said, but I want to add just a couple of things. I really think that the future of keyword research is intent, and that you're going to find that low competition keywords with high traffic volume are like unicorns. They don't really exist. And if they do exist, they're going to be something where the keyword is so broad that there's no intent behind it. And a great example I have for you is furniture. Furniture gets millions of searches every single day, but nobody buys from furniture because they get to furniture, they get overwhelmed, they go, oh, actually what I need is dining room furniture. Okay, dining room furniture. Then they get tables and sidebars and hutches and all of these other things that could go in a dining room, and they say, oh, well, really what I wanted was a curio cabinet. And so now they're searching curio cabinet, and they're so far from furniture to begin with that there was no point in trying to optimize for the keyword furniture. From that perspective, if you really think about, as Tim said, what the questions are around what people are looking for, there's a website that I really love called answerthepublic.com. that you could put any topic in, and it will give you a list of all the questions that is found from the internet that people are asking. And it's super, super helpful in terms of identifying areas where you can create additional content. Because particularly in an e-commerce setting, you can't just be talking about your products all the time. Nobody wants to read that. So if you're going to create blogs or articles or anything like that, it's got to be stuff like, how do I get a ring out of my mahogany table? Stuff like that's going to add value. So if you do a search like, if you use a tool like Answer the Public, then you can see this is what people are searching about and create content accordingly.
Excellent. It's no good talking to Tim about tables, though. He's usually under them.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. And I mean, and I'll add to what Jenny said. You know, I've quite a good example here is a company that I was working with, and they did literally the most boring thing in the world, which was commercial gas hoses that fits from the gas supply to the back of the stove, and they literally all are the same size. Okay, you have 3 different types of interlocks, but that's about it. And the color was all yellow. That's it, right? So the question is now, you know, and the traffic around it was just wrong. But how are we going to start? And it became a priority. It's going to be like, okay, so traffic is pretty much flatline across all of this. Looking at research, things like it's never going to get anywhere, and we were always there. But but we know there are 60 million restaurants. They all need a gas hose, but they're certainly not searching for gas hoses. So how do we get them to find the freaking gas hose? Because they're not actually searching for it, but we know they have them. So it came a question of, right, so how do we find these guys? And it's not as if they just search, replacement gas hose. So then we started producing stuff like gas safety guidelines, gas, anything you can freaking think of about gas in a commercial setting. And at the same time, coincidentally, we've hit a lot of answer boxes for this kind of stuff. And so you actually got to find the customer in another way because they're literally not searching for it. So that's how you drive your sales and your brand and pulling them in. So you can also start thinking about in other ways on there's actually not enough traffic for what you sell, but the product exists. So how do I get them to me? So then you start looking another way. So it's another flip side to what you asking, whether high traffic, whereas the product sells, but how people aren't searching for it. So yeah, it's all about defining it. It's all about defining it and actually finding what the user is looking for. Really interesting stuff.
Yep. And Micah Fisher-Kirshner has just joined us from the west coast of the USA.
Yep, there we go. Hello.
Hey, buddy. Look, it looks like we've answered all the questions without you tonight, Micah. Let me just click this and see. Yes, thank you for watching time. Anybody, anything to add before we go? I'd like to thank Jenny Halaz for coming along to keep the boys in line.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
All right, I'll close this off, and we can chat. Look, thank you for your interest in our work. Your participation makes what we do worthwhile. We'll be back at the same time next week to do the same thing again. But for now, it's good night.